Good evening, everyone. As you've been so kind as to introduce me, my name is Komla Dumor. I work for BBC News. Usually when I say that, people either get very upset or they become very excited. Working for the BBC is quite an experience, and I enjoy what I do. And we're here to talk about challenging conventional wisdom about Africa and the coverage of Africa, of course. But before we get into those issues, I want to give a shout out to my people who are here. Anyone from Nigeria here? All right. Fantastic. Arise, O compatriots. Shall we? Arise, O compatriots. Nigeria's call obey to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and mind, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. How about that? Now, I know there are other nationalities here. I'm a Ghanaian, by the way. But then again, judging from the immigration trends, I might as well, and that applies to just the way. But I often get mistaken as a Nigerian. And look, I'm incredibly proud to be a Ghanaian. My grandfather composed Ghana's national anthem. But in 1957, when Nkrumah said to my grandfather, who was a music teacher at the time, that we need a new national anthem, my grandfather wrote Ghana's national anthem. However, my mother tells me, she's gone now, but mommy tells me that there was a day they were in a shop called Leventis. I don't think that still works anymore. Yeah. And Grandpa was singing another song. And she asked him, Daddy, what's this song for? And he said, oh, I'm writing a song for Nigeria when they become independent. The point he was making is that these borders and these nationalities and these things that we hold so closely are slowly beginning to become less and less important. And if you're from South Africa, Tanzania, don't worry, I do the same thing everywhere else I go. No, but the truth is that it happens all the time. Everyone thinks I'm a Nigerian. I walk into, T.M. Lewin and, I hear we've now moved to Hackett. It's Hackett, yeah. It happens fairly frequently. I mean, I'll tell you the best I thought you were a Nigerian story was I was at the Dorchester. A good friend of mine, a wonderful woman called Eleni Gabremedin, works in Ethiopia, set up the commodities exchange there. Said, Komla, come over, there's an event here, I need an escort. And I said, yeah, no problem. And by the way, by escort, I mean the African version. I mean African escort, as in I was escorting her. So now you know. So I was escorting Eleni, who's a fantastic woman. And when I was there, I met another woman who I truly admire and I've always looked forward to interviewing. And that's the Nigerian Finance Minister, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Amazing lady. So I walk up to Madame Ngozi and said, hello, Madame, I'm Komla from the BBC. And she looked at me and said, oh, Kola, how are you? And I said, excuse me, ma, but, I'm from Ghana. She said, really? And you're so confident. And that's a true story. I have a few friends who were there. And, and you would think, for a minute, I wasn't too sure whether to feel insulted or, but she meant it in a good way. And it's so funny that, a few weeks later, I was doing a sit-down with Baba, or General Obasanjo, as you know him. And I narrated this story, and then he paused and looked at me and said, what's your problem? So I take it from all sides, but you know, I am a Ghanaian, very proud to be one, but because of what I do increasingly, it's become less and less important for me. Over the past 2.5 years, I think I've had possibly the best job at the BBC. I was hosting a program called Africa Business Report. Every week for 2.5 years, I would travel to a different African country, doing exclusively stories about business, opportunity, entrepreneurs. As a result, I have a lot of air miles. But I also have, even as an African, a better understanding of the continent that I come from. I can travel to Windhoek, Swakopmund, Maputo, Luanda, and I have people, I have friends there, and I have a better understanding of the continent. So how does that translate into how the BBC or international media cover Africa? Let's begin. Talking about Africa has become, I think, quite popular these days. Everyone's kind of coming to the party, even though some of the people at the party already knew the party was there and it's kind of started, you know. But everyone's kind of like, yeah, you know, Africa's, you know. So there's The Economist sometime last year. There's Time Magazine this year with the same headline, you know. Quite original. But there comes a point in every professional's career or anyone who's dealing with Africa that they realize that it's not the same and the story cannot be told in the same way. And this book, and there you can see me posing on the cover, it's written by a good friend of mine called Charles Robertson, and you know, this really distills all the information about Africa and things, and it's a great cover as well, but it really contains a lot of detail about how Africa is changing. This is where it happened for me. 2009, that's a diamond worth several $100,000. I was in Botswana. Empty building, not much going on there. It was called the Diamond Hub. Walked around, you know, Botswana is the biggest producer of gem diamonds. You know that. But the dilemma facing Botswana and many African countries is you produce these raw gem diamonds, make $4 or $5 billion a year from sales, but the diamond industry itself is $50-60 billion a year. So these raw diamonds get shipped to Antwerp and to Asia, and they get cut, and you know, rich Nigerians go and buy the diamonds in somewhere in London or wherever it may be. So there's your Diamond Hub. This man is Dr. Akolong Tombale. He was the head of the Diamond Hub, and I went there to interview him, and this is what he told me. He said, "We are teaching our people how to cut diamonds." That's all we're doing right now. Teaching our people, and there they are, learning how to cut diamonds. And this was the beginning, just a few months old, the Diamond Hub. Fast forward to this year. Did anyone see the story in the Financial Times about De Beers and... Yeah, okay, well, I'll tell you, because it kind of slipped under the radar. De Beers has moved its trading operation to Habaroni. Did you know this? Well, it was on the BBC, so. So it brings me to another interesting point before we get to this. There's always that moment when you realize that no, Africa, things are really going on. I have a great friend, his name is Sebastian. Sebastian works in South Africa for a multinational bank. And every time I'm going to South Africa, I call up Seb, and we were roommates in college. He chose a different path. So I call up Sebastian, and Sebastian says, "What time will you be in?" And I'll say, "Oh, you know, I'll be in at, 9 o'clock, Virgin flight, blah, blah, blah." And I get there, and there's a brand new Mercedes waiting, and, drive off to his place in some gated community in Santon. And then Sebastian calls me and says, "Komla, I'm coming to London, oh." But yeah, bro. He arrives at the airport, and I say, "Take the Heathrow Express." And then the Bakerloo line, and But the best part is recently, sometime this year, and Seb is doing incredibly well, and Seb calls me up and says, "Komla, Charlie, trouble, oh." I said, "What's the problem? What's the problem? I thought things were going great." He says, "Man, boy, they want to transfer me to London." And that's a true story. But increasingly, you're finding African professionals who really, they're building fantastic lives and opportunities on the continent. And what London used to be is not necessarily, it's not the same anymore. So Seb comes to visit and has a good time, and he's off. And I think for many professionals here, you can relate that you are no longer limited to working in the city. You are now talented and capable enough to work anywhere in the world, including in Africa. And the reason why it's so important is because all of you have what I call institutional knowledge, or what my good friend and mentor Lise Doucette says, you've tasted the dust in the alleyways, so you know how to get around. And so it brings me to my point. In 2012 and beyond, whether you're international media or you're a business professional, how must things change in terms of how you cover the continent? And there's my point number one. There has to be balance, or what I say, please don't patronize me. Okay, where's that? I've given enough props to Nigeria. It's been enough. Where do you think this is? Okay, I'll tell you. This is Luanda. Yeah, that's Luanda. That's Angola. That's Luanda as well. However, that's also Luanda. Less than 5 kilometers away from those posh yachts and all those expensive restaurants. This is Luanda too. So the question I put to you is, what story should you tell? Yes, there's a lot of good news about Africa, but there has to be balance. And all of you recognize when you're being patronized, when you're being told things are perfect when they are not. Everybody wants balance. So in this case, if I'm going to Luanda to talk about economic growth hitting 10% over 10 years and wealth, I have an obligation to tell this story as well. I'll tell you about this lady. I did an interview with her, asked her about Angola's economic growth and stuff, and she said, well, to give you this interview, you have to do something for me. And I was thinking, oh, I'm going to have to pay her or something, and we're not allowed to do that. But she came up with a better idea. She spends 2 hours there fetching water, so she gave me a wheelbarrow as punishment. so I ended up, in exchange for the interview, I had to fetch water for a few hours. So, point number 2, when in doubt, ask an Africa expert. This is one of my favorite ones. Who really is an Africa expert? How would you feel if you're watching me on telly one morning and, good morning, my name is Komla Dumor, you're watching BBC News. Coming up this morning, we're going to have the latest from Syria, where the rebels are on the offensive, conflict in Egypt, etc., etc. And we are going to speak to an expert on haggis, that Scottish dish that everyone loves, and how it affects cholesterol. So we get to the haggis interview, and I said, yes, and so, research has shown that haggis tastes great, but it may affect your blood pressure, etc., etc. Let's turn now to our haggis expert at University of Makerere. It does seem a bit odd, though. But would you have the same reaction if I said we're going to talk about an African story and we had an expert from Washington or from London? So, ask an expert. This guy is one of my favorite people. His name is Kasim Kahira. Nobody knows the Great Lakes like Kasim. Kasim, what is the impact of the M23 taking Goma? Kasim starts firing. Kasim, can the rebels move beyond towards Kinshasa? Kasim starts firing. Because he knows the place. He's from there. He understands. He speaks the languages. Kasim, what did, I'll make something up, like, what did Kagame have for breakfast? Okay, well, let me call my contacts. He can do that. But the fact of the matter he knows it. And please, 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 respect your audience. By saying, well, you speak the native tongue, does not make you an expert. I have what I call the Suya test. I was telling Amina about it. If you say you're an expert on Nigeria, or an expert on Lagos, and I ask you, where do you buy suya? And you tell me, Echo Hotel. Obalende Abi? Who's an Africa expert? If I want to talk about the impact of trawling, of fishing on the West African coast, this guy is the chief fisherman in Freetown, on the Freetown coast. He'll be in a better position to tell me about the impact of deep trawling or deep fishing on the coast. There's another. Is she? You know what I like about this lady? When she comes on air on BBC and you ask, Rolake, how, do you think that, the trouble in the Delta, how will it impact oil? And then she'll start speaking phonetics and blah, blah. And then after she's done, then we go out of the studio and she's like, oh boy, how now? She's great. That's Eleni, your Africa commodities expert. There's your Africa child care expert, But here's your final point, and we've gotten to this, really. Hire the best talent to tell the story, or the view is great from my hotel. So I call it the view is great from my hotel. Is any correspondent or any organization can fly in some star, and they'll land in there and tell you what's happening by looking out of their window. But then there are those who actually know the place. There's Alan Kasuja on our Newsday program. There's Lerato Mbele. Wonderful. She's with us now. That's Salim Kikeke. BBC now has Swahili on television. Hire the best, the brightest, the best looking. But the fact of the matter is this, and this is how I'm going to close. The biggest single audience for the BBC is Africa. So no one's going to have to tell you that you have to present programs that address the needs and the interests of an African audience. And that's what we've been doing. We launched Focus on Africa Television a few months ago. It's been wildly successful. The numbers are impressive, not just in Africa, but what's exciting is that the numbers are massive around the globe, and we're very proud of that. But I'll leave you with a thought, which actually comes from my days on radio. Network Africa was one of the first programs I presented, and we used to have a proverb of the day, and people would send in these fantastic proverbs. And one of my favorite ones, and you can take it as you like and interpret it as you feel. The narrative will always glorify the hunter until the lion itself learns how to write. Or you could say it slightly differently. Until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. It's not so much about what the international media does, but what you write about yourself. Thank you very much and have a good evening.